And we are live here in the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner, my co host, Abby Matthews. And this is our last week, or actually next to last week, wink, wink, of our hashtag Indie Summer series of shows that we've done. And last week, we were scheduled to have Jason Anspach on the show with us to talk about newsletters and really kind of gathering that audience. We had some technical issues last week, so here we are making up that show today. And let me tell you what, Jason Anspach, if you joined us a couple of weeks ago when we had Nick Cole on, you got one side of that Galaxy's Edge behemoth slash success story slash whatever that was. When Nick and Walt joined us, we had such a great time. But the other side of that business partnership and writing partnership is Jason Anspach. And Jason brings a lot of things to Galaxy's Edge, but one thing that he really brought from the beginning was this idea of connecting with an audience and building a readership of people that were wildly passionate of about what they were doing. So all of that, but if you're like me, Jason from the Rockwell Returns series, one of my all-time favorite book series, and it's a pleasure to get to speak with you again, Jason. It's been a couple of years since we've talked, so welcome to the show.
It's been a while, and thank you for generously saying technical difficulties instead of couldn't get West Coast time and East Coast time straight. I appreciate that.
It happens. Time zones are my kryptonite and have been for 12 years of podcasting about books. So I didn't give you any grief about it because I've been there and I know all about it. So
Well, you can
I'm
give
just
me grief
happy that
about
we
it.
were.
I wouldn't mind.
Oh man. So help us recap just a little bit.
Sure.
How many years ago has it been since you guys had this idea of playing with Star Wars action figures in a sandbox? That because that's when you and Nick first started talking about it, and we did a special episode of Author Stories where you guys kind of launched this idea to the world.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Well, you're not going to believe this, but it was almost 10 years ago. We're almost coming up on the decade mark because it was
Insane.
2016 when Nick and I started the project, and then it was 2017 when the first book, Legionnaire, actually released. So by late 2016, we were already delivering early copies of chapters and books to our subscribers. And yeah, I actually remember that call with you because we were so excited about it. And Nick was super, just Nick, like very confident, very good to go into it. I was thinking, I hope like we don't get sued over this, but now I understand a lot more how all that works. But yeah, it was 10 years ago, and the basic concept was I had just finished the series that you had mentioned, the Rockwell Return Files, and thank you for being the guy who read it. Literally the one guy. I thank you for that. Um, and
No, I love those books, Jason.
well, people, yeah, so a small group of people do love those books, and I love to write them. But then you get known for writing something else, and people say they want that a lot more, right? Like so I've got 10 people that say give me another Till Death, and thousands that say more Galaxy's Edge. So I fear the mob is what I'm saying.
Understood. Understood.
Mhm.
So the initial idea was we want to write quote unquote Star Wars stories told the way we would like to see them told, and really just the idea of this genre, this kind of moment in pop culture that really kind of shaped you and Nick's thinking about a lot of things and the way that you like stories to unfold. What like like I know you had this initial idea, but did
Mhm.
you have any inkling that it would snowball into what it is today?
No, no, a lot of things that we couldn't have predicted
Yeah.
helped it snowball into what it is today. I think what we were looking at was, Nick had asked me, just kind of being a writing mentor, and he had said, if you could write whatever you wanted, what would it be? And I said, well, kind of a silly question because if I could write whatever I wanted, I would go and write some Star Wars novels, but that's not going to happen. One, because why would they have hired me? I was a nobody. And two, it's just, it was in the publishing side of things was starting to change over at Star Wars with Disney acquiring it. So he laid out like, well, the thing is with Star Wars, yes, you like the characters and yes, you like those sorts of things, but there are certain intangibles about Star Wars, which is why you like it. The hero's journey, the adventure, the feel of the universe. And he said all those things, those things can't be copyrighted. Luke Skywalker can be copyrighted, but an adventure story like heroism, those are all just part and parcel of what makes a good story. And so as we talked and we kind of reviewed all the influences on Star Wars to begin with, from Kurosawa to Joseph Campbell, we realized, yeah, we can probably do something like this. We can surf really close to the line, and we can make a fun story of our own. So that was just the goal, was just to write something that we liked, write something that would be fun to write. We talked about it with you as,
Yeah.
we're just a couple of guys playing with action figures in the sandbox, and we're inviting people to come and see how the story in the game turns out. So what happened after that was Disney went and Disneyed Star Wars, right? Like they started by
Yeah.
telling all those dedicated readers, hey, everything that you've invested in no longer counts. And that bothered me because I was reading all those books. And so we went to our readership very early on and said, hey, guess what? We're never going to do this. Like, we own it. We're not going to sell it. And we're promising you here and now, at no point are we going to come in and say, none of this is real. And people really, really like that, and started telling their friends, and the rest is history.
So, okay, so you got the story idea. So
Hmm.
you and Nick are talking. If you could do anything, what would you do? You do this.
Hmm.
Then how do you translate that into, because at some point you realize this thing had legs or had the potential to have legs,
Hmm.
and so you did a very interesting thing, and you started gathering an audience for this series really before launching the series, because you started like a subscription service
Hmm.
before Patreon or any of that was. I mean, those things were just starting to
Hmm.
sort of emerge, but nobody
Right.
really knew how to use it, and
Hmm.
all of that. And so you kind of bootstrap this kind of subscription slash dedicated fan reader type thing before you really had anything to build that on. So what was your initial thinking, and how did you think about kind of infrastructuring this thing ahead of time?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Well, I felt pretty strong that subscription models were going to be a way that people were going to be consuming their media. It wasn't a slam dunk at the time. Like, I think I think people were getting into it. I think the WWE started their own subscription network at the time, so people were kind of toying with it. But there was a lot of, well, this isn't going to work. People aren't going to want to spend money. Amazon was doing its Kindle Unlimited, and that was having some okay success. I think at the time, it was doing pretty well, but it wasn't what it would become quite yet in the years leading up to that.
Mhm.
But for me, it was an opportunity to allow people who connected on a deeper level than I just want to read the story, to give them somewhere to go. And so the thought process was, we know what we want to do. We have a very clear idea of the kind of story we want to tell, some of the characters, and the rules for the universe that we're writing. And we're
Mhm.
going to share those on social media, and we're going to communicate with the people. So it was never a thought like, hey, we're going to do this and this is going to be all of our revenue. It was more like, this is a way that we're going to curate people who are really passionate, because you have to be really passionate about an idea or about an author in order to plunk down some money. Like, a lot of people might use a burner email address to tell me more when it comes out, but we figured we could reach those people well enough through ads, word of mouth, emails, once the book was on Amazon. So we put our efforts into this little subscription model, and I think we charge something like 99 cents a month or like $5 a year at first. It was super cheap,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, because the goal was just to get people locked in and committed.
Yeah.
And we actually still have subscribers because we never raise rates on your subscription. So we still have subscribers that are paying $5 a year for literally every Galaxy's Edge book. But that was the thought process. Let's get people who are willing to get buy-in, because these are the people who are going to do what we can't do. And that's going to be, they're going to give us social proof and word of mouth, because like every author is going to talk about their book, and every
Mhm.
author rightly should be proud of their book. But by now, and even by then, we're all used to authors saying, here's this great book and here's what I love about it. Of course, it's a labor of love to begin with.
Sure.
What's invaluable is somebody who doesn't have any skin in the game, but will say passionately, this is a great book. This is exactly why I like this book. If you're like me, you will like this book too. And we found that it was the people who responded and went into that subscription program who really pushed Galaxy's Edge. Like we have some guys that they have really beat up copies that they've passed around air bases, and it's just filled with signatures of guys who have read it. Someone showed me his Amazon account, and he had bought and purchased something like 200 copies of Legionnaire over time, just to get people reading. He would kind of buy it for guys sitting next to him at the VA. Um, you can't possibly get that with a Facebook ad spend. You can't
Yeah.
get that with a social media post. You can't get that with an email. But if you can find those people, and you can make a good relationship with them, and kind of make them part of the universe, like they're an integral part of our team and they know it, um, some amazing things can happen.
That's incredible. And the way that that you guys connected with that core audience that then became your biggest advocates is something that every author hopes that they can replicate. So what were some of the initial things? Obviously, you had people that were like-minded, because we have this kind of pop culture reference that we can
Hmm.
all kind of lean back on. But other than that, like, what do you think it was? Was it just the dedication to this thing that people love? That you know, we have this thing we love. People have not treated it correctly. We will come with us on this journey. Like, looking back now, can you put your finger on what exactly it was that helped you to gain that initial audience?
Yeah, I think there is the part of that, and that's there's something that you can't replicate and you can't predict, which
Yeah.
is when there's going to be an audience who feels like they have been mistreated or abused. Um, but it does happen. It happens all the time, and you can go into almost any fandom, and you can find people who feel like they're not being listened to, they're not being um, they're not being serviced. So there was that, and that was just starting to happen with Star Wars at the time. So that worked out really, really well for us. But the thing that any author can do is essentially dedicate themselves to their audience and be available to answer questions, be available to share insights, to talk. I mean, we would just talk with readers who wanted to tell us about, what was going on in their family. Like, I lost my dad and this and that. And it was, hey, phone call, prayer, something like that. Because we really do look at them in the same way that someone running like a small town merchant store would look at their customer. Like it's someone that like our goal is to get to know the people who are our heavy readers, and think about them, and and Nick and I actually pray for our readers when we know who they are, as well as in general. So that was a big part of it for us, was we will not only make the commitment to give you a good book and avoid the mistakes that other publishers are making, but we want to treat you as if you really matter. And I think people responded well to that. and continue to respond well to it.
It's an interesting dynamic because the the kind of old school thinking of authors was, this person who lives in isolation, dreams up these
Mhm.
stories, and then from the top of their ivory tower, cast it out to, a publisher who then takes it, runs with it, and sells the book while you sit in your tower and write another book.
Yeah.
You guys are actually flipping that dynamic on its head, and you are trying to understand your readers so that then you can produce more of what they like and what they will connect with. And then not just the stories, but there's a personal aspect as well. Um, when you're kind of turning that the and we all know, anyone who's been in publishing knows that old mindset never really existed. That's just the thought that people had about it. But
Hmm.
and indie publishing specifically, and even though you guys have formed your own publishing company and all of that, you're still indie minded.
Hmm. Definitely.
That really is a shift in, and it's really shifted a lot over the last decade to decade and a half, of the old ideas of publishing versus the new ideas of publishing. Do you have, since doing this, have you seen that sort of mindset kind of seep into the rest of publishing and people start to sit up and pay attention?
Um, I don't know that I have, honestly. I think that I've
Mm,
seen it among some individual authors
yeah.
who do a great job with staying connected with their audience. But I think with the indie publishing, there was the aspect of being there for your readers, and that's strong. And then there was also the aspect of you can use modern technology, you can use Amazon in a means to get your books noticed. And so a lot of, I guess, what you would call like the indie publishers, I
Hmm.
think that their focus is on, we know how to launch books, we know how to use the Amazon ecosystem, and we know how to make a book more successful in some cases as an indie than it would be if it was coming out through a traditionally published house. Assuming you ignore like print sales, obviously, because that's
Right.
that's a huge differentiator between what indies do and what the traditional publishers do. But yeah, I don't see too many. But the ones we do see, we've tried to work with, because especially where it does our audience. So a great example is an author named Mark Sibley, who wrote a World War III thriller called Mongol Moon, and he published it. And he's not a fast writer. He doesn't do any of the things that you're really supposed to do traditionally now, after 10 years into this kind of indie revolution for me.
Yeah.
But he's not he didn't do any of those things. He was slow, it took him forever to follow up, but he kept engaged with his readers, he became a part of their life. And it got to the point where making fun of Mark over where his sequel was just like a daily occurrence. Just log on and harass the author, and then you kind of go about your online shenanigans from there.
Yeah, because
And
that always
so
helps.
yeah, it always helps. But we ended up signing him with our imprint Wargate, because what he writes is what we know our readers would like, and he works with his audience the same way we like to work with our audience, and that's basically who we're looking for when we do Wargate. Um, but yeah, I wish more authors would do it, but I think a lot of authors in the indie sphere, um, they're more interested in talking with other authors and kind of reveling in the idea of being an author and author community and am writing. And there's a place for that. I don't want to be like the old frowning killjoy, but but if I spent a ton of time there, I wouldn't be spending time getting to know my readers. And if I did, then I wouldn't be spending time writing. And so both of those things need to happen. And then, you know, I, Amazon's changing, launching a book is changing. All the rules that kind of allowed indies to sneak onto the bestseller lists are changing. And so I think it's going to become even more important to have a strong relationship with your readers than it has been to date.
And honestly, those bestseller lists, like there's some benefit to that, obviously, and but a lot of it is bragging rights.
Hmm.
At the end of the day,
Totally.
once you get that list, okay, like how often does a milestone like that actually lead to more sales other than the sales that got you there? Like,
Hmm.
you have to kind of
Right.
weigh out, what your goals are and what are you spending all of your kind of emotional capital, trying to get.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And
Yeah.
it's we I think a lot of us are driven in a way and we want to prove things. Um, Writing a book is so hard that I think you already have a desire to prove and do hard things. And so you do chase after those things as indicators of success, but to your point, it doesn't do much in the long run. It doesn't make or break your career. No one cares that you were a bestseller um, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 months ago. They only care if you have a good product for them to read, a good book that's going to pull them out of their real world and their problems and let them enjoy themselves, or if you become a valuable part of their daily life in some capacity, which is something that we all now have in the online world. It's why podcasting, shows like yours, shows like Sean Ryan, they are as big as they are because these are people who become a part of their life despite not actually knowing them. And so I think that authors can do that, but they have to put the work in.
Absolutely. A couple of questions have popped in. NJ says, since Star Wars is already a fan base, did it help or hurt the upstart of Galaxy's Edge? And then NJ has a kind of a follow up question that I'll tag onto that. How did you get to make money off of something that is essentially a fan fiction? Were there copyright issues you had to deal with? And you kind of alluded to this when we first started talking about it a decade ago. You were kind of nervous about, like, can we do this? Like, where are the lines? Like, how did you carve out your niche so that you were creating something that was fresh and new and also
Mhm.
legal? You know?
Right. Yeah. 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 Thankfully, we had the name Galaxy's Edge before Lucasfilm, Disney had the theme park Galaxy's Edge. I think had we not, we definitely would have had to change the name. But as far as naming rights goes, the only thing that's cost us is SEO optimization because anytime you search Galaxy's Edge, you're getting vacation packages. So that's too bad. As far as like having an established fan base, I think it's always helpful when you can point to something and people can intuitively know what it is you're doing, right? Um, the copyright questions, that's a good question, and it comes from a sincere place, but it is one I had. But the reality is, the actual stuff you can copyright is the stuff that you wouldn't put in Galaxy's Edge. And so you reach a point where you start to realize that, you know, Galaxy's Edge is fan fiction to Star Wars, as Star Wars is fan fiction to, say, like Flash Gordon. Um, it's heavily, heavily inspired. And when you see the original, you can clearly see the next thing. And yet you can also see how it is very distinct. And so our goal with Galaxy's Edge was to write something that felt like it could exist in the galaxy in the Star Wars universe while still making it very clear that it's not in the Star Wars universe. And so the first book alone makes that obvious. It really isn't until the second book that I feel like it gets a strong Star Wars vibe. The first book, if anything, is more of a almost more of a David Drake, Robert Heinlein novel.
Right.
And that was kind of by design as well. So, but yeah, that's the thing. It's like you can't you can't copyright Space Marines. Like you can't
Right.
copyright soldiers on battlefields with blaster rifles. Like those things are
Yeah.
not copyrightable, and they're not or even original to Star Wars.
Or
So
empires and rebellions. That's
empires and rebellions. Yeah, I mean, anyone who's read science fiction for a long time
right.
sees like how much of that is out there that doesn't have the word Star Wars or Star Trek, or
Yeah.
Babylon 5 or anything else to it. So a part of it is just a healthy fear for not wanting to have the 800-pound gorilla that is a Disney lawyer jumping on your back. But
Yeah.
the reality is, um, there's just nothing there. That it's uh, it's like this. It has the pacing, the feel, the adventure, but it's also its own thing. And so we, Disney, we over the years talked with Disney, talked with publishing houses that produce Star Wars books. Everyone's aware of what everyone else is doing, and so it would be like us saying, "Hey, The Mandalorian copied our character Tyrus Rex," which is something that Hollywood people have told us did happen. But you can't, you know, you watch, if you read the season, if you watch the first season and then you read
Yeah.
the Tyrus Rex novels, which came out before, there are similarities. But again, all they are is similarities, because you can't copyright the idea of a space western. You can't copyright the idea of, kind of a loner bounty hunter who's very capable and a little bit morally blunted, a little bit emotionally stunted, however you want to put it. These are just things that exist in storytelling. And
Yeah.
so once you realize that, the whole copyright, this, that, you just kind of shrug your shoulders and say, that's not how it works, kid.
Well, yeah. I mean, ever since Joseph Campbell identified the hero's journey, and he didn't make up the hero's journey existed. He just pointed it out for all of us.
Hmm.
And
Right.
once he did that, he really freed up a lot of people to say, "Okay, I see where this happens in stories, and I see why they work and why people like them. Let me
Hmm.
take this same these same concepts and put my twist on it." And it
Hmm.
really, you think that tropes and, trope is such an ugly word to a lot of people, but we're just identifying the things that resonate with us. And
Hmm.
once you identify those, it really frees you up to, uh, we have this weird way of thinking that the more you elaborate on something, the narrower your focus gets, and it really frees you up to connect on the deeper things that resonate with people. It's a weird dynamic that happens and you guys have noticed this, that the more specific you went with your target audience, the more it opened up to a wider um, reader base. Did that ever did that surprise you that the more specific we get, the more people we appeal to?
It didn't surprise me, because I think we were seeing that segmentation in culture and in society already.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of people want to, well, the reason why Star Wars was important, for example, really any property out of the 70s and 80s, is because they were properties out of what was much more an American monoculture than anything else. Like, when we were younger, Hank, we all went and saw the same movies, the same TV shows were on, the same books were
Right.
in the bookstore, and there was some variety, but it was like you were aware of it, right? Like you were aware of what movies were out, and then you watched the same edited for TV reruns on TBS or whatever. Like we
Yeah.
were all watching the same stuff. We had the same cultural touchstones, and so that's just how life worked, right? Like that's why some, frankly, like mediocre movies are so cherished, because we all saw them and we saw them hundreds of times. Um, but we moved so far away from that now. And so it's actually the specificity that allows people to drill in and enjoy what you're doing. If you dream of a 1977 Star Wars, or if you dream of, a 1985 Predator, that's almost impossible to do now, because audiences have unlimited choice. And so
Right.
by focusing on, hey, this is what this is unapologetically, this is the appeal. If you are this person, you're going to like it. If you're not this person, you're going to complain that it's not for you. But that doesn't do you any good, because all you need to do is click next and find the book that is written just for you. But um, we realized pretty quickly that you are writing to your audience, and the audience, like we said, we built out of our subscribers. And the more specific we could get to that audience, the more people like that would come. And then it's just a matter of taking that share of the demographic. And so It's something that we try to do in everything that we write, and we find out sometimes positively, sometimes negatively, how the Venn diagrams overlap. Like we took a chance on another series called Forgotten Ruin, which was military fantasy, just modern rangers set in like a Dungeons and Dragons Tolkien-like setting. And
Right.
we were not sure if our audience that was there for Galaxy's Edge would be there for that. And it turns out they were. But we've done other books that we thought, well, maybe there's an overlap here. And it's turned out there isn't. And so you're really just boiling down to that demographic interest. And that's no way to, it's a good way to maybe run a publishing company, but it's no way to write a book. But
Mm.
it helps us when we have an idea and we like it, and it's one of 10 ideas that we have. It has always helped us to sit down and say, okay, we like this, but does our audience like this? Or is it too far afield? And when it's too far afield, we just put it in the drawer for retirement writing.
I want to ask something. I got to jump in because I feel like no one ever asks the question, like, how did you go from 0 to your first 10 readers, your first 10 super fans that were like, this is the thing that we have to have?
Mhm. I think all we did was the people that already liked, the people that already kind of liked us on Facebook or Twitter, just because of who our personalities were. Like they knew who we were, they knew what they liked or what they liked about us, and so we basically just said, hey, here's what we're doing, and they responded. We started a little like Facebook group, and they would invite their friends that they thought would be into this, and that was it. It was entirely dependent on word of mouth. Like at no point were we messaging people individually and saying, hey, I'd really like for you to be in this group doing this or doing that. It was just us kind of saying it out into the ether, and then building a community that people felt comfortable inviting their friends to.
What has always interested me, Jason, is I knew both of you guys, and I knew what what you were like,
Hmm.
but you had been writing, kind of um, noir ghost story
Hmm.
gumshoe detective novels, and
Yep.
Nick had been writing like post-apocalyptic, the Old Man in the Wasteland, and we all did Apocalypse Weird, and this
Hmm.
kind of thing. Um, but you guys weren't known for Galaxy's Edge, yet
Right.
you were able to gather this audience of people that was going to like that before you wrote it.
Hmm.
So what
Yeah.
was it?
Well,
And I'm
we
trying to
weren't known at
remember,
all.
like, yeah, was it just the conversations that we're having on that were taking place on Facebook and Twitter, and just um like Abby said, like you had not published Legionnaire yet. How
Hmm.
did people know that you were going to, like, why would they join you in the sandbox?
Right. Yeah. 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 And we weren't known really at all. Like I had written some books, but it's not as if those were New York Times bestsellers, right? Like, like they were selling, I don't know, 1,000 copies, 2,000 copies in the first couple of years, which, for an indie author, it's good. Like
Yeah.
that's a success that I don't want to take lightly, because, you know, I know I have friends that excitedly have published their first book, and they're hitting refresh, and, they get 20 sales in a month, and half of those are family members. And so, not to treat that lightly, but it was not like there was this huge audience. And part of the reason why I shifted out of that series is because, paying for editing, paying for cover design, I was like, this is mathematically, this is just kind of flushing money down the drain, right? Like I can't
Right.
justify a fourth book,
Yeah.
unless I want my wife to say, why are we scrimping and saving again? And you're giving these artists and editors money, and, just so we can lose money. So it had to kind of shift. And in a way, it was kind of this has got to be successful. And if it's not, then it really has to be relegated to a bit more of a hobby. Like I can't take
Yeah.
it as seriously, because it's just, I can't afford to take it that seriously and pay for everything. So as far as what the questions were, again, it was 10 years ago. And I think that what we were doing then was maybe a little bit more unique, because you have to remember back then, Facebook wasn't even charging you ads they were still in growth mode, right? So they wanted to get interesting content on the feed. They wanted their groups to have lots of members. They wanted their pages to get big. They were trying to build and consolidate their audience. And so that's another timing issue that can't be replicated now. But we were all kind of upset once Facebook started doing the thing where it was, you can publish a post as your page, but people aren't going to see it unless they click several buttons or
Yeah.
unless you buy an ad. But at the time, that wasn't the case. Like, pages were just sort of like, hey, come see our business. We're open at 7, and it would just show up right there with everything else. You had just a ticker-like feed. So it was easier for people to see what we were saying, but we would just say things that tied into it. We would say, hey, one of the things that's always annoyed us about Star Wars is how the stormtroopers are supposed to be these elite soldiers, but
But they
clearly
can't
in the
eat
movies,
anything.
yeah, and tactically, the way they move and the way it's like you get this promise of only stormtroopers are so precise and they're shooting, and then you have to come up with multiple conspiracy theories to explain their performance in the Death Star. So, and throughout the rest of the movie, and we would just talk about that, and these are things that fans were talking about for a long time. So we would just sort of say, hey, we've always talked about that, and that annoys us. And so this is what we're basing our Legionnaires off of. We want them to be like this. And if you had this technology, wouldn't it make more sense to do this? And if you had a futuristic space helmet, shouldn't it do this? And people would say, yeah. And in addition, it should do this, this, and this. And those would just be conversations that people who would like the book enjoyed having. And then we would tie in little interesting factoids about, like, well, why did we name them Legionnaires? Well, we named them that because Nick's dad was once in the French Foreign Legion, and so it was kind of an homage to his father who had passed away, and that then gave it now a personal setting as well. So none of that was calculated. I feel like a lot of this is just being a person who has the ability to think about other people as people. Like, as weird as that sounds, but as you get older in life, you realize there's a group of people who think about people only in terms of what can you do for me, and
Mm.
not think about them. I mean, I'll tell you, Hank, I have people who are on our mailing list that have been on our mailing list for 9 years, and I haven't heard from them. And I'll try to find out, like, are you still alive? Like what's going on? Because I can't help but think about these people. I can't help but think about our readers. When we have a longtime subscriber who unsubscribes, I don't want to bug them, but I'm actually sad to see him go. I'm like, oh, I've been reviewing those roles for 10 years, and your name has been there every month for the past 6 years, and now you got to go. And usually when they reach out to us and say, hey, I just can't afford it, we'll be like, well, then just take the next year. We'd rather have that than lose you. And now I'm going to get a bunch of preview requests, but still, yeah, to me, it's common sense, right?
Yeah.
It's just wanting to genuinely be interested in people and wanting to genuinely talk to them and hear from them, as opposed to view them as potential customers and consumers who ought to consume your product. And
Jason?
Uh-oh.
Yep. Did we lose you? Oh, Jason? I think the stormtroopers got him.
Uh-oh.
Jason? Oh,
He muted. Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go.
Jason, are you back? Ooh.
There'll be the
Jason's in-
magic of editing later.
Jason's in Washington State. Are we having some bad weather there?
Well,
So,
pick it up, but man, so much good information. And also, it is so difficult sometimes when you're just starting the process now.
yeah.
Compare to someone who started 10 years ago, and you want to know, how did they do this? And how can I replicate this? And the truth might be, because of the timing and because of the algorithms and because of how the platforms have changed and because of X, Y, and Z, that might not be something we could ever replicate again. And so, like, to me, that leads to the question, what can we do now? And it
Right.
sounds like one of the things that they have done really well. Jason, are you there?
I think so. My
There
phone
you
can
are.
only do one thing at a time. I was telling Hank before that I'm as much of a Luddite as I can be. And so someone who has the pass to get past my do not disturb called, and I hung that call up, sent it to voicemail, but that killed everything. So I had to come back out.
That's perfectly all right. We were just talking while you were trying to get reconnected there, Jason, that looking back now, we can look at all the things that you did, and the reality is that the landscape has changed. And if you guys were to try to replicate this whole process in 2025 as opposed to 2016, the challenges would all be different now. And
Yeah.
so, and playing armchair quarterback is a losing proposition usually, but knowing the way things lay today, can you point to how you would do things different today if you were trying to spin this whole thing up as opposed to what you were able to do then? Or is even
Yeah.
thinking that way, futile?
No, I don't think it's futile, but it is certainly harder.
Yeah.
You can't rely on Amazon to push books the way they once did. I think that we're entering a period where there's already some fatigue from indie authors who have put out work that's not necessarily the best, just because they're trying to get a big back catalog and build up passive income. Like it was the hey, here's how you can build some great passive income. It was that get rich quick thing for a while. And so I think if I were to do it all over again, I would probably go to a place that does have some decent engagement and communication, like Twitter. But I would be very mindful of, excuse me, I'd be very mindful of the message I was getting across, because you can see what drives engagement on social media. And it's usually politics, it's usually outrage, it's usually stealing memes and, stealing tweets and things like that. And, and the downside to that is you can build a following, but it's a following who wants to hear your hot takes. And the Venn diagram of I love this guy's political hot takes to I love what you write and I want to read it is not necessarily big, unless it's a collection of political hot takes. And so I think it would be a harder, slower go. You'd have to be very consistent. You would have to be thoughtful. I think a Substack is another thing that you could use if you were a writer to try to get that out. But you just have to understand that social media now is so firmly established that they're not going to do much to help you. And so it's going to take a lot of consistent messaging without sounding like the guy who bores everybody at parties. Because Hank, you've probably talked to those authors where all they want to do is sit there and tell you like, oh, well, in my third book, there was these Corbynites and the Corbynites, and just tell you this huge lore dump. And you're sitting there smiling politely, but you're like, I don't care. Like, if I wanted to read the book, I'd read the book. And so finding that mix of provoking thought and conversation, but not just lore dumping, which a lot of authors, because they're so proud of their lore and so into sharing it, don't know how to do properly.
Yeah. So, and I didn't plan on talking about this, but because you mentioned it, like you're absolutely right. You could go to Twitter, X, whatever it's called this week, and you could get a big following with your dumpster fire hot takes. You're absolutely right. And then you could say, well, I've amassed 10,000 followers. Now let me pitch my book to them, and then get crickets because your your Space Marine story has nothing to do with the political fallout of the day.
Right.
So just because you garner a big following on social media doesn't mean that that will translate to people buying your book. So if someone is going to go and gather this following, that will ultimately, and we have to be very careful about, using our following for uh commercial gain, but that's, I mean, let's be honest, that's what we're doing. um how do you make sure that you have cultivated the correct following that will translate into appreciation for your work?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's tough. And it really boils down to there are still people who have a singular focus, and you can probably go online. You know what actually would be a good help is if you went online and you followed people with a following who talk about something that you're not interested in, right? So let's say you're not interested in fantasy football. That's fine. You don't have to be interested in that, but go find someone who is interested in fantasy football and who is making some kind of money on fantasy football, because that's a niche. You have to really be into fantasy football to say, I'm going to pay this guy to help me draft a better team by buying his book or buying his preview guide. But
Yeah.
see how that person communicates, or see how the guy who's selling books about golf tips communicates, and see their interaction, and then say, okay, can I translate this into the kind of person who likes to read and likes to read these books? And I think that you can, but you just have to be prepared that it's going to be a lot of work. It's not going to be as simple as it once was, but it still happens. And usually those accounts only talk about the thing that people want them to talk about. And when they go off script, and when they say, hey, I know that you're here for my fantasy football takes, but I'm compelled to weigh in on this political thing, they usually get nuked with a ratio, because that's not why people followed them. And
Right.
you're immediately going to alienate half of your potential audience by doing that. And so if you're using social media as a tool of finding readers, I think you have to be aware of that, and you have to let the main thing be the main thing. Now, if you go on
Yeah.
Nick Cole's social media, exact opposite, right? But Nick's not using his social media to find an audience. He's using his social media to express his opinions. And he kind of has made that distinction known. Like he'll say, hey, don't follow me on social media because it's not about what I write, really. So there's a difference there, but he's using it in a different way strategically. He's not trying to build audience through it. He's just trying to express himself as a person, and the people who want to know him more then either say, oh, hey, I like this guy because he's like me, or they send me the email who's like, hey, I love your books, but I'll never read anything that you write with Nick. And you just go, okay, like free country.
It's funny because the more Nick does stuff like that, the bigger the cult of Nick Cole becomes.
It's true. It's
Funny that
true.
way.
Yeah, it is. Mhm.
Well, I think the one thing that you guys have done that almost anyone listening can take away from this, because like I write something completely different from what you guys write. I write middle grade, fun. I mean, it's a little bit of adventure. It's mostly humor, but it's
Mhm.
geared towards kids who are like 10 years old,
Sure.
But the thing that you guys have done that I'm trying to figure out, how do I translate this to building my own audiences? It seems like you guys have really leaned into it's one-on-one. You're trying to connect with one person at a time. And the fact that you guys would reach out with a phone call or a prayer to some of your readers, like I think that's this human connection that we're really missing. And when you start thinking about things like 10,000 followers, our brains want to jump and get us to 10,000 really quick. But if they're, to Hank's point, 10,000 people who don't care about what it is that you're doing, you've put all that energy, you've wasted it on not attracting the people that you really want to attract, which is honestly the people who love the thing that you love. It doesn't even have to do with selling your book. It's how am I going to bring in these people into my ecosystem that love all the same things that I love, that love to read what I love to read, that laugh at the same jokes that I laugh at, that
Hmm.
read for the same reason that I read, to escape, that want to be seen for the same things I want to be seen for. And so I guess that's the $1 million question. Like, how do you find those people? And I appreciated, I think it was Walt who said, and I don't remember if it was on air or off air, that he was just bringing boxes of books to the gym and leaving them for other people to pick up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, he did things like that, and he was, that's ultimately how we got to know him, was as a reader, one of those super reader subscribers who was so on board with what we were doing that we started, working together. And that's something we've done repeatedly.
Mhm.
When we've needed merchandise, we found one of our readers in Nampa named Bill. He's like, oh, I have an embroidery shop. Well, we've used his embroidery shop for all of our patches and things like that
Nice.
ever since we started, because it's like, okay, you're someone who gets us. You're in the network, so let's use you. And
Family.
we've done that over and over again, and that only serves to further reinforce, because
Mhm.
again, we're not looking for a cheap deal from Alibaba. We're looking for
Right.
people like us, people
Mhm.
who are putting their heart and soul into their work. And then we say, hey, you're there for us, we'll be there for you. And it's worked out really well.
Love that. So let's talk specifically about newsletters for a minute, since that's ostensibly why we're talking today. But so you've gathered your initial group of readers. Now, how do you use that list to stay in touch with people, and what's your philosophy on your newsletter list?
Mhm.
Like in communicating, and do you have, like, if someone is a new onboarder to your list,
Mhm.
do you have a
Mhm.
certain amount of information that you kind of feed that new onboarder versus someone who's been subscribed for 5 years? And how do you then communicate with them? Like, what is your thinking about how you kind of cultivate that list and make sure that it stays fresh, you stay on people's mind without pestering them? Like
Mhm.
how do you think about that list?
Yeah. Well, early on, we would automate them through kind of a behind the scenes, catching them up on all those early social media posts and things like
Yeah.
that they might have missed. And so it would be, hey, welcome. Let us tell you about this series. And so we would repurpose that. As it went on and the series got so big, we tapered that down. I think now, well, once again, back then you could send an email and it would arrive in the person's inbox. It was pretty straightforward. Now you can purchase something from someone, put them on your whitelist, subscribe to their email, and it will still end up in their spam folder after a certain amount of time.
Mhm.
And so it's a lot harder to get emails out. And so now, we tend to use our email list kind of just for more of a bare bones informational. Like we write it in our own voice. It's usually Walt or me who writes the email, and we try to keep them simple. And so we're essentially just putting it to, hey, you're on this list, so we're going to tell you when something comes out that we think you would like, a new book, something along those lines. And then we just give them the invitation to find us on Substack or X for something that's a little bit more personal and frequent. And that's worked out pretty well. But that's the problem with email now. Even Amazon emails are showing up in spam folders. So, we were talking with some fans who were like, I didn't realize this book came out. I've subscribed to your
Mhm.
email list. I follow you on Amazon. And so then they kind of walked us through it, and they went in their spam folder, and there were, several months worth of new from Nick Cole, new from Jason Anspach, or emails
Mm.
from us. And again, these are things they signed up for. They said they wanted, they've clicked, but email service providers are in such a battle to make sure that your inbox is not getting flooded, that they're wiping out a lot of stuff that you probably would be okay to see, or at the very least wouldn't be too inconvenienced to just delete yourself. And the thing that I always think about is, well, if Amazon can't get all its emails into your inbox, that
Yeah.
makes it a lot harder for you and I to keep our emails engaging enough to always show up in the inbox. And the rules are constantly changing on that. So at this point, I view email as one of the tools to do what we're ultimately talking about, which is finding the ability to directly communicate with your readers without having to rely on someone else to do it for you.
So would you say that, because the conventional wisdom has always been you cannot rely on social media because the rules are constantly changing, the algorithms are changing.
Mhm.
The one thing you own and control is your email list. And I still believe that
Mhm.
that's probably the best shot. But would you say that your email list paired with like a Substack or something that you uh, or uh, or whatever it is, so that if something falls through the cracks, you also have a kind of a fallback presence? What would you think about, kind of shoring up that the inconsistencies with email and how it's delivered and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, the advantage of email, like you said, is you do have those email addresses. And so no matter what, if you keep a backup of that, you have email addresses that you can email from one email service provider to another. So you do have the ability to keep in contact with people versus, like you said, social media, especially in the days when it was a lot easier to get nuked from social media, to get your account banned, your group banned, that sort of thing. And then, something like Amazon, you can have tens of thousands of followers, but you have no means of alerting them to a
Right.
new book. You're just relying on Amazon to do it. So I view it like as buckets though, because people ultimately have their preferences. And so what we try to do is just have a bucket to catch the person whose preference is whatever it is. So email is one of them, and it's the largest one we have. But we also have an SMS list that we're growing, that
Mm.
for people that can just get a text message with, hey, this book is out, bink, because that's how they like to hear about things. We actually have started sending out direct mail, like the old school direct mail to people. And that's kind of a very small batch experimental, but I like the early runs on those. But all things are just, they require cultivation through email. But that plus social media, plus a Substack, a YouTube channel, those things out. And we're not really concerned with any one of them being gigantic, right? Like it's not
Right.
like, oh, if the YouTube channel doesn't have 100,000 people, it's a failure. It's more, hey, if you're the person who goes on Twitch, but his inbox has 2,000 emails unread, then go ahead and find us on Twitch. And when Nick plays, Call of Duty on Friday night and mentions, "Hey, our book is out," then you'll know about it. So that's become our strategy: is just a little bit everywhere, and
Diversify.
we hope to as many people as we can. You just use all those buckets, and you understand that when you spill the water from the top, some of it's going to go in the big bucket. A lot of it's going to spill off to the side. Try to catch it before it all hits the ground, and then it's kind of lost in the noise.
I've heard a couple of people talk about the SMS strategy, and that's a new thing that I've not really looked at. I'm assuming there are services out there that will kind of handle that in the
Mhm.
same way that like Mailchimp or somebody like that will
Yep.
that kind of let you broadcast that SMS message.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it. I mean, it costs, per send. Mailchimp, I think, actually has that service now, but the others as well. But yeah. But then with each strategy, it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're not going to send them an SMS that might pop in their Apple Watch that links to an email post that no one's ever going to read on their watch, right? Like, so we tend to look at that as very straightforward, lock you in, and it's more of one of our segments on our list when people unsubscribe is we segment out people who don't like uh, don't like the personal touch. They just wanted to know when a book releases, and so we have the option for people to sign up for a streamline list when they unsubscribe from our main list that says, hey, only email me when a book releases and the link. That's all I want. And that list is, a few thousand people, and but those are people we would have lost otherwise. We treat our SMS kind of the same way. Hey, we released a book. It's called this. Here's the link to buy it, and that's pretty straightforward, and it gets decent results. It's at least paying for itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Jason, to kind of wrap up our time that we have today, since we are focusing this summer on people that have written a book and are getting ready to launch that book into the world. We know the story that you and Nick had a decade ago of building this thing that has become, greater than the sum of its parts. But if someone if someone were launching an author career now, what's one piece of advice that you think is actionable and beneficial to helping them begin to find their audience?
I think that you have got to, the one we've used, and we probably used it on your very first show, Hank, that we were on, but it's a mantra that Nick and I use, and that is readers over writers. Because the writer community is very helpful in a lot of different ways.
Yes.
And when you're writing a book, it's a lonely job, you're kind of by yourself. And so I completely understand the need for it. But if you are only talking to and marketing to writers, then you're probably not going to get a very strong launch on your book. And so you've got to work towards finding people who are readers. And readers are just, I would say, higher than average, intelligent, everyday people who have their interests. And you just find those people and you provide them the best means capable of consuming what you've done, whether that's an ebook, a print book, or an audiobook. And make that your focus, for however many hours you spend online. I mean, it's got to be 9 to 1 that you're trying to connect with actual readers versus spending time weighing in on any author debate, can you believe so and so did this? Can you believe such and such did that? Like, I can't I can't begin to describe the number of authors I have seen who spend all day long wrapping themselves in author drama and no time trying to find, let alone get to know the actual reader.
Sage advice. Jason, thank you so much for taking time to join us today, and tell folks where they can find you and get plugged into all the great stuff that y'all are up to.
Yeah, so you can probably find me over on X. It's I think I'm the Jason Anspach over on X. You can go to jasonanspach.com. You can go to galaxiesedge.us, wargate.store. There are wargatebooks.com. We have a host of places that you can accidentally stumble on and find us. And if you do, and it's your preferred method, just reach out. Like that's what we're there for. I would say the majority of my online friends are people who actually have read my books, and we realize we share other interests. No surprise. And half the time we're just talking about the stuff that interests us. So if that's you, by all means, jump right in and join in. We make a point to respond to everybody.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us today, everybody. Remember, we'll be back tomorrow, same time at standard podcast time, 2 p.m. Eastern. Let the time zones fall out from there, wherever you are. And we're going to talk to Craig Martell tomorrow about taking all the concepts that we've talked about in Indie Summer and coming up with a plan of how to get your book out. Jason, thank you for joining us. Abby, I'll see you tomorrow.
That's right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, both.